Welcome back to Sanford Days. We're talking about Commander again, but this time it's a silly Billy idea and I'd like you all to hear me out. Part of this idea already does exist in Pauper Commander where you do not have a legendary commander, but hear me out, this is going to be different in a variety of other ways that I could not find anywhere else on the internet. I'll be honest, I didn't look for more than 15 minutes. Today, what I am suggesting is a commander variant and I would like to call it Militia, and I think that this would solve two problems that I have getting commander games together. I don't know if you've been at your local game store like me, but sometimes finding that fourth person is just incredibly difficult. Just where a game load like Commander Militia would come on in. You'd select one person to be the crown. Whoever is the crown gets to play whatever commander deck they want, however they want. It's a standard commander deck, and there are two important changes. Firstly, the crown will always start with 60 health, and secondly, they are a permanent monarch. The monarch cannot leave them, that condition is theirs. Outside of just looking into the changes to the crown player, we have to look at the changes to the other two players, who will be known as the militia leaders. Unfortunately, as is all too common with any militia, they are underfunded, undertrained, and very scared. Each militia player only starts with 30 health, and they cannot have any legendary creatures, artifacts, lands, or anything else inside of their decks. Their command zone is instead filled with their militia leader, who is going to do the same exact thing as a commander, except not be a legendary creature, very similar to Pauper Commander. Two other notable changes to the game mode is that there will be absolutely no commander damage, as it would kind of defeat the monarch's inflated health total, as well as the militia leaders are going to take their turns in tandem. Kind of like a one-sided set of two-headed giant, and that sentence was fun to say. The crown cannot win unless both militia leaders have been defeated, and the militia leaders can't win unless they've defeated the crown. And there definitely is undertones here that are similar to Arch Enemy, considering you're kind of ganging up on the one person, but I feel like having two players versus one is a lot easier to balance than the 3 versus 1 with the whole scheme deck involved. And keep in mind, at least 2 players of the 3-person group here would have to have their own militia decks, which are commander decks built without any legendary anything. And I don't know about you, but I love good deck building challenges, and building a deck without any legendary creatures sounds like a wonderful time for me. I would be so happy to have a Mardu Siegebreaker deck for this. This chicken jockey was made to overthrow the throne, and no one can tell me that I only was trying to make this idea so I could have this be my commander and then yell out chicken jockey. However, what are the potential problems of trying to make this a game mode? I've laid out a few issues. The first issue that I see so far may just be the limitation of health only being to 30 on the militia players. A lot of fantastic cards just happen to not be legendary, and to be real, commander decks don't really rely on them that much. That stipulation for a legendary commander honestly is just a limiting factor that they're going to be using for marketing. Having a legendary creature as your commander used to be a cool limiting pool that made you think about who you wanted to select because there were much fewer options and legendary creatures were actually kind of rare. With the rise of Commander, there have been so many legendary creatures printed over the last like 5 to 7 years that it's just not really that much of a limiting factor anyway, because you can typically find a legendary version of a non-legendary card that does roughly the same thing, give or take maybe some power. So allowing the militia players to start with 30 health when their decks could still be very, very, very efficient may just be way too much for them. Maybe reducing it to 20 would be a good idea. And the other issue I identified is the crown might just be completely outpaced in this game mode. I wanted to ensure that they always had monarch because that would give them at least some tempo advantage, but I'm just worried with 2 players taking their turns in tandem, maybe it's not enough, and perhaps there needs to be a rule in place where the crown can play like 2 lands a turn instead of just the 1. Lastly, the biggest problem that I've been mulling over while I've been thinking about this potential game mode is the power of color diversity inside of a Magic deck. Let's be real, inside of Magic the Gathering, whether you're playing Commander or Standard, having a multicolored deck does make you prepared for a variety of situations. Let's just look at like mono white. They like big walls and health gain. By themselves, a mono white deck is very predictable and it's very easy to keep track of. However, you add red to that crap and you go Boros, I feel like that amplifies their threat tenfold, as both of those colors alone are not nearly as good as they are together, from my perspective. Which brings me to a logical conclusion for the militia decks. I think that they may have to be monocolored, even though that means I won't get to chicken jockey and take down the crown. Regardless of the shortcoming of the idea that I have so far, this is just a first draft, and I would really love anyone's comments or opinions on what they think. Would they like to play a game mode like this? But I genuinely do believe we have a need for it, because 3-people pods are very common. And I'm not by any means saying that you can't just play a regular commander game with 3 people, but I find that it's just not in that same level of satisfaction when I play commander with 3 people, and a lot of my decks just aren't as fun when I'm playing with fewer people. Good example is my goad deck that I made the other day with the Ranai, however you say her name. It's not really fun into a group of 3 people. If it's just me and 2 others, I'm just gonna goad the crap out of the other two until someone dies and then try to beat the last person. It just feels really formulaic. The chaos isn't really there with only 3 people. I think that's why people like playing Commander with 4 people so much, is when there are 3 total other targets, you actually are forced to politic instead of just trying to control the board state. There are so many decks that have just mass control that can typically hold down 2 people. The fourth person is where that gets tricky. Let's say hypothetically we did make this a game mode, and I am currently looking for volunteers inside of my playgroup to help me playtest this, but if we were, what would we use as militia leaders? Let's assume for this thought experiment that all of the rules I previously laid out, including the newer one of being monocolored only in the militia side, the first one I was thinking about was Magmakin Artillerist. Mr. Artillerist is a mono red 3-cost commander who can do a lot of damage simply by doing what red wants to do naturally and discarding cards. Keep in mind, when I say commander, that does not apply for regular commander games. This is only for the proposed game mode. He is not a legendary creature, and neither is my next suggestion, the Gigantosaurus. An absolutely big-ass 10/10 green dinosaur as your commander would be hilarious. That's probably not a very effective recommendation here, but if you were looking for something more fun in mono green, I'd probably say the Watchful Radstag could lead to an interesting deck interaction when that's your commander. While I initially was really excited to do something with like a Mardu Siegebreaker, the more I think about these ideas where you have 2 separate people playing 2 separate monocolored decks on the same team, that actually seems like it could lead to a lot of really fun interactions. Especially if 2 people were to build these kind of militia decks to complement each other. Perhaps you have a blue deck that specializes in card draw for more than 1 player, with like the previously mentioned red deck that's really good at discarding cards and turning that into damage, and perhaps those 2 things can, combine to act like an Izzet deck, but they're just 2 separate players playing them. Ultimately, I am not a game design expert, and I never have been, nor will I claim to be. The only real game I've ever worked on is one called Slimes Can't Jump, and I still haven't finished it, even though I had the progress going for like, well, more than a year now. I just can't bring myself to code any longer. But what I will say is it definitely feels like there is a void here for 3-player Magic. Like, we're all used to Commander with a 4-player format, and most of us know about Standard, although very few people play it anymore, which is a 1v1. I definitely think a 2v1 strategy with an asymmetrical guide would be fantastic. Not only do I think something like this could be a lot of fun, but I think it's ultimately inevitable. Magic the Gathering is constantly releasing new products with a whole bunch of different twists and themes, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't try to focus on a very unique and kind of niche market of 3-player card games. Could very easily see if something like this were to ever become mainstream that they would use something like the Guilds of Ravnica or like factions in general in order to try to put different single-colored decks and a militia together against one overwhelming big bad. Perhaps if this were to have more development and have any kind of storyline behind it, you could have the big bad always be something like the Eldrazi, or maybe you're going up against the Dragon and you have to put your forces together in order to beat them. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here. I'll stop ranting in just a moment, but I think one of the biggest things that this potential game mode could have going for is the fact that a regular commander deck can still fit into this equation. And with different rules and restraints, there's a really good chance the person playing the actual commander deck is going to get to pop off and do their thing and feel really good about themselves. But these are just some of my ideas for a hypothetical game mode that may never come to fruition. But you can always do whatever you want with your cardboard, you own it. If you want to change the rules of your pod, go right ahead. This is just what I thought of. What would you think of? What did you think of my ideas? Let me know in the comments below. But as always, this has been Sanford Days. I'm Course, and I get everywhere. Bye-bye now. Oh no, they turned the lights off. I'm in here all alone, and there's not even that super cool theme song to keep me company.